Hello guys and girls, and today's tutorial I'm going to be showing you guys how to build cool interfaces like this using CSS Grid. And I had an idea on it because I was working on a project of my own and stuff like that, and this made of I used Grid for this, but I have more tutorials. I have an easy step-by-step way to make you guys have a very cool and very understandable concept on Grid. So if let me go to my Visual Studio. Okay, so yeah, I had something for you guys. So firstly, we are going to work in our example 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we'll make all our items look like this. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is defining our grid. I'll go for the example 1, ex1 and ex1. Yeah, so I will look for the ex1 so we can, yeah, ax1 container, the grid container that we had. You see the section example 1, then inside the container we have a divs. I've already styled the divs and stuff like that because in this tutorial we are focusing on grid. My last previous tutorial I explained Flexbox within 5 minutes, and since grid has lots to cover, I think it will take more time, but I hope I can cover this within 10 to 15 minutes as well. So let's get started. So firstly, for the parent container, you need to do display grid. Is very necessary even on Flexbox as well. So that's display grid. Okay, so now you have access to full functionalities of grid and stuff like that. So we have grid. So the first thing we're going to be doing now is grid template columns. So let me show you guys how it works. So it depends on how many columns you want. Okay, let me say I need my first column will be 400 pixels. You see that it has just only one column. So if I need like two columns, I'll have like 200 pixels again. So you see this first column cover up 400 pixels, and this one covered up 200 pixels. So if you need another column as well, you will do let me say another 200 pixels. You see you have like three columns, but it's not responsive because we're using pixels, and pixels is not very cool for web design and stuff like that. But I'll show you guys a very responsive way to get through it. So the next thing is if you want it to be 4 or something, you can just do 100 pixels as well. You see it makes the column 1, 2, 3, 4. You see, and okay, so this one 400, 200, 200 and 100 pixels. Okay, to make it more responsive, we also have rows. Okay, let me see, I just do this like this. Let's just stick with 400, 200 and 100 pixels. You see, just have like three columns. Then let me go to the rows. I will have grid templates rows, and I'll make it you can just do it like 400 pixels. So the first one, you see the first one covered up 400 pixels. So if you want to work with the second row that is down here, you'll be like let me say this one will be 200 pixels or something. You see this first one covered 400 pixels and this one covered 200 pixels, and still the same column and stuff like that. Three columns and two rows. You see how it goes. But this is not a very good idea of how to do it. So what we're going to do now is let me say we want something like this. Let's say we want this one to be 100 pixels, this one 100 pixels, and this one 100 pixels. So you see it's equal 100, 100, 100, three rows. So instead of doing something like this, you see most people do something like repeat. So repeat, how many times do you want the rows to repeat? You say three, then what's how many pixels or width do you want it? 100 pixels. You see it still do the same thing. Three, there's okay, you can also do four as well. You can just play around with it as well. Four, you can do five, you can do six rows, six columns, I mean to say. So but best practice is not using pixels. It will make it not super responsive. So best practice for this is using, let's say we want three rows, then you see most people doing one fr, one fraction of this. So it's more responsive than that. You understand? So we can also give gap. We have row gap and column gap, but you see most people just write in gap because it covers everything. So I'll just give gap of 20 pixels. You can see row gap, it just gives only on the row. You can say row gap, it gives only on the row. And see only on the row. Then you can also say column gap as well. It gives only on the column, but you see most people giving just normal gap. Okay, and it gives both in the row and the column as well. So that is the cool thing about display grid. It helps you to be versatile. You can play with the rows, you can play with the columns as well. So that is it. So we now have there's what they are calling grid auto rows. Yeah, auto rows. So if you have seen something like min max, what this min max is saying is firstly you put the minimum size of it of the rows. So because I'm working with rows, you say 100 pixels for the minimum size, and I'll just make the maximum size auto. Auto is the highest possible row that is very responsive, or you can also do one fraction as well. Anyone works well, but I'll keep it as auto. Yeah, so you can also, even one fraction, you can replace it with auto or stuff like that. So you see, okay, then you can see many people to make the thing more responsive. Let's say I open it in my browser right now. Opening my browser, you see it's like this. So if I bring it down in a smaller screen, it still adjusts properly. In larger screen, it still adjusts properly. That is the meaning of the auto, the highest size and the lowest size. So we now have if we have, you can play around with it though, so I don't want this video to take too long and stuff like that. So we have grid template columns, we have repeat. We can do, like, you know what repeat is. The first thing will be how many times you want the columns to repeat. I'll say autofill. Autofill is like, autofill is, it's fills in depending on the amount of space that is available on the window. Okay, so I will make the minimum min max. I will use min max. So the minimum size of it should be 200 pixels, and the maximum size should be auto, or I'll just use one fraction. Okay, you see how it goes. So let me open it in my browser again. So you see it takes up 4 spaces, 4 columns here. If I make it down, it takes up 2. So that is the meaning of this autofill. It just fills in automatically, because normally when we are repeating, we can just say 3 columns, 4 columns and stuff like that, but this time we're working with autofill. Okay, so that's it for the first example, and how many, all the things you need to know to get started with using grid. Okay, so for the second example, let's go. The second example, they'll say, we said for the example 2, placing items on the grid. Okay, let's play around with this. Let's play around with it. So we have the container, we have, that's what they're calling, firstly we'll do our display grid. Before I forget this, you have to use your display grid so you can, flex around with the container for our example 2 and stuff like that. So let's make this thing more cool. And the next thing we're going to do is let's make it have like 2 columns, because this one is just like a one-sided column. So I'll do grid templates columns, and I'll make it 3 FR and 1 FR. Okay, you see, so the first one is 3 fraction, the second one takes up 1 fraction. So you see, it have just 2 columns, and other things find a way to fix in themselves as well, but we're going to adjust it to make it more cool. So the next thing I'm going to do now is, then I'll go to the heading. Let's go to the heading. The heading is this example 2, placing items on grid and stuff like that. So example 2, you can see the heading, example 2 right here, placing items on grid. So let's make it cool. So the next thing, we have something like grid column starts. I'll tell you guys what it does. Grid column starts, you can see 1, it starts from 1, and where will it end? Grid column end. We have grid column end as well, then it ends in 3. I'll show you guys why it did like this, but there is a very short way to do it. We have column start and column end. So if you go to your browser, let's click here, okay, inspect, and go to the header. I think it's example 2 header. Okay, so we click on the grid. Okay, so you see there's a number that you can see here. I don't know if you're seeing the number 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So you can see, you can make the grid start from 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's why I did for the header. If you go, you see for the header, the starting is 1 and 3. So it fills in this space. So look at this. So if I cancel this, you see how the header is unorganized. But if I want the header to fill it in just 1, or from the column to 3 right here, I'll just do that thing that I did extrally. So it would be grid column. You can just use a short form instead of using grid start and grid column start and grid column end. I can just do 1/3. So it starts from 1 and end in 3. So let's go and look at our console again. You see it starts from 1 and end with 3. Okay, so the next thing we are going to be doing is the next thing for the main. Where's the main? Let me go and check it out for the main. So the main is this p elements there, the paragraph elements there. So let's play around with the main. Where do we want the main to be? So we say the header should start from 1 in the column and end at the third column. You understand? And so we also want the header to, we'll use for the header as well. We'll have grid. You can do it for the row as well. So grid row would be 1, 2, 2. Okay, but it's not necessary for you to do it, but you can just, you know, do it for fun and play around with it. So if you want to see the functionalities where it started from, so you can see here is 1 and 3, so you can make it from here to here, and this 1 and 2. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is for the main. The main will just do grid. Where do we want the main to be? So you can play around with grid. That's why I just love grids as well. So grid, where do we want the thing to start? Let's go and check out. So we want the main to start from column 1 to 2 as well. Let's make it the main, we'll make it column 1/2. Okay, nothing happens because the header has already occupied it, but we'll just do row. Let's find out where we're going to put it in the row side. So where do we want it to be? Let's make it 2/3. Nothing still changes because the console already set some things already like intact, so we don't need anything. But that is how you can adjust the things properly. So if you go to your browser, you can see you can make it column 2 to, where is the last end, column 3. So you can see the main section is in column 2, sorry, I mean row 2. See row, the vertical sides are row, so 2 to 3. Okay, so next thing we're going to do now is let me go to my Visual Studio. Next thing we're going to go for the footer. The footer, we need it to like occupy this remaining space right here. So the footer, we need it to occupy the remaining space. So what we're going to do is we'll do column grid column. There are two ways to do it. Either you do 1/3, it covers up because this is 1 and 3. Let's go and check in our browser. So you can make it this 1 and 2, 3 as well, like something like this as well. But since the header I've already covered 1, 2, 3 in the heading, so the footer can cover 1, 2, 3. But the easiest way you see people doing is just let me cancel this and just say, you see, look, just take a look at this, and if I do span 2, it just covers up. Like span means it's the only span that you can do is by 2. Sorry, so 2 span 2, so it just gives like long space and makes it cover up. So if you use anything, you can also use span 2 as well in the header as well. Let's check it out. So the header, I can just do span, let me see if it works, 2. Okay, it does the same thing, you'll see, but it's span 2 mostly people used to use as well. So now let's go for the third example. For the third alignment, we need the alignments, this thing to be like this. Okay, so the way we are going to do it is let's go. I've already selected all the first elements. So this is the first child, second child, third child, and fourth child. So the next thing we're going to do now is let's align it properly. So where do we want this blue one to go? Let's go and check in our console. The blue one would be so let's go, where's the section 3? Okay, example 3. So let's go to the section and no, example 3, where's our grid? Okay, firstly we have to do our display grid. Sorry, no offense, I was looking for our grid. So in the container I'll do display grid, so we can access grid as well. So display grid, you can see the height and stuff like that. I've set the height and this gap as well. So display grid. So how do we want the container to be? Okay, so you see that this thing has like 1, 2, 3 columns. So what I'm going to do now is I'll do grid grid templates columns, and I'll do repeat the grid three times, and we make it 100 pixels. You see, it makes it 1, 2, 3 as well. Okay, so that's a good start. You don't need rows as well, but if you want, you can do rows as well. Let's just give rows quickly, templates rows, but it doesn't do anything yet because our column have already collected all the children elements. So I'll just make it 2 and 200 pixels as well. Okay, so see the rows and the columns. So the next thing we're going to do now is let's go for the child elements and make it look like this. So let's go for our console. Now you have seen our grid. So if I check, let's go to our example 3 section. Yeah, let me click on our grid. Okay, so where do we want our blue elements to be? Let's check it out. So the blue one would be, we want it to start from 1 to 3 in the column side, 1 to 3 in the column. So we'll go for the grid. This for the first child, we'll do grid column. Grid column, we'll do it 1/3. Okay, so you have seen the blue one have covered up this place, 1 to 3. Okay, now where do we want, what else do we want to move? Our second child would be, I think, yellow or something. I think yellow is our second child. So let's go to our console. Let's know where we're going to move it. So we want to move the yellow down. So what are we going to do? We'll make the yellow, we'll make it 2 and 3 in the row side because we want to move it down here. You see 2 and 3, 2 and 3, so it takes it down here. So the next thing, let me go to this, make it grid row would be 2/3. Okay, so if you look, the yellow is now there, so the next, our third child is, let's check for who is our third child. Sorry, our third child is I think our third child is the orange. So the orange would be, so where do we want the orange to be? Here, down in the row. So make the orange 2/3 as well. So the orange in row is 2/3 and under 2/3 in the column again. So it starts from 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 as well. So if I go to the grid, I'll just go here and say grid column. I'll make it 2/3. Nothing happens. And okay, something actually happened. So you can also, because since the first child already taken up this space around here, so it just goes down. But you can also add, to make it more specific, you can also add grid row 2/3. Okay, so the next thing now is pretty much easy. To make this green guy come down, everybody know what's going to happen, what we're going to do. So we'll just be like grid, since we want it to go down in the row aspects, we'll do grid row and we'll make it span 2. Easy, and it just drops down, it just strengthens it. That's what span is for. Okay, so you see we have created an interface like this with just grid, and so that's how you can keep your website more organized and stuff like that. So our last example is creating something like this, and this is the fun part because I actually find it pretty much interesting. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be doing is, firstly, before I forget, for our grid, for our last example, I'll do display grid before I forget about it. Okay, so we want this to be header, nav, main, and footer. So to do it with grid, what are we going to do? Firstly, let's see how many things we want to, how many columns we want. Okay, how many columns we want. So I need, since you see that this nav is just a little bit small and this one like a little bit longer, the main content is a little bit longer. So what we're going to do is, how many columns do we want? We'll do grid templates columns and we'll make it repeat 3 times with 1 fraction. Okay, so you see how it goes. So this is just the start because we need 3 columns. The reason I need 3 columns is that the navigation will be smaller than the main content. So the navigation will take in 1 column and the main content will take in the rest of the 2 columns. Okay, so let's get started. So this time is the time of using, like, you can use classes to define your grid. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is, it's called grid area. Grid area. So in all the whole selectors, we use main, nav, header, nav, main, and footer. So what we are going to do now is to call each classes of them in the grid area, so we can be able to work with them. So I'll just say grid area. The grid area name for this is header because the class is header. So the next one is nav. I'll say grid area for the nav is nav because the class is nav. Then I'll go for the main contents. Grid area for the main contents is main. We'll name it main because the class is main. You see, it's just scattering around, but we're going to still fix everything. This method I think is very cool. So the next one, grid area for the footer is footer. Okay, so now let's align everything together. So what we're going to do now, in the parent elements, I'll go here and do grid template areas, grid templates areas. So let's use the areas to make a function. You know that we have like how we set 3 columns. Sometimes we do 100 pixels, 100 pixels, 100 pixels and stuff like that for columns and row, template columns and row. But in areas, since we have defined the classes of each areas, what we're going to do now is to specify how we want it to be. So the first one, we're going to make it header space header. So we are calling the classes that we give in the grid area header. Okay, so you see the header carries all the first space, So let's go back, give another space. You see, most people to make it neat, they will just make it down, like bring it down like this, and write it under each other like this. Yeah, anyhow, but it still works anyway though. So then I'll give header. Then next one, what do we want to be in the next line? We'll call it nav, main, and main. Okay, so you see the nav carried the first column, and the main and main again. We call the main class again and call the main class again. So what do we want to be on the bottom? So I'll just click here and give space and click enter, and then I'll give my semicolon, my double quotes, then I'll say footer, and footer. Okay, so that's it, as easy as that. We have created the interface that we're looking for. So you see, you give areas, we give the areas header, nav, main, and footer, and for the grid, we give, for the template areas, we give it header. So it knows that since we are repeating it three times 1 fr, it knows that the header covers the space. It knows that the nav covers just one, then the main takes up the remaining one, and the footer. So this is an easy way to make your website more functional. But we can also do something like this, repeat too. Okay, but this time around, if we need the header and the footer and the main to take the same amount of space, that's what we're going to do. So you can see the nav and the main content takes the same amount of space, okay, because we're repeating it by 1 fr, then the header and the footer as well. So but I'll stick to the other one because I just like how it looks. Okay, so 3, and you see how it expands and stuff like that. Okay, so that's all I have for you guys in Grid today. If you have any questions, drop it in the comment section. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel for more tutorials like this, and see you all in the next video.